One of the enduring myths of the Second World War is that German victories of the opening years of the conflict were achieved by tank forces superior to those of Britain, France and the Soviet Union, not the least reason being that the sheer scale of Germany's victories in the period 39 to 41 requires in the popular mind a simplistic explanation, and superior numbers and technology undoubtedly satisfies that requirement. It is also a testament to the continuing effectiveness of the propaganda images created by German cameramen of over 50 years ago, constructed as they were for the sole purpose of fostering the notion of the invincibility of the German army in war. So audiences were deliberately regaled by scenes of panzers set alongside burning Allied armour, with smiling German crewmen standing victorious amid their destructive handiwork, the impression being conveyed that of overwhelming proficiency in the execution of mobile warfare. Such impressions were consciously fed by the selective coverage given to the larger and more powerful Panzer IIIs and IVs, impressive symbols of German might. But the reality was very different and more complex. Numerical superiority was never a factor except in Poland. In the other campaigns, in France and Russia, it was either parity or gross inferiority. Nor was it quality, for in the first 2 years of the war, Germany's armoured forces comprised essentially light tanks, which were obsolete even before the conflict began. Germany's success derived from her employment of armour in a completely novel way. To understand how this came about is also to relate the story of the light panzers in the evolution of the German tank arm. While many Germans were to blind themselves to the truth and find escapist explanations for the armistice of November 1918, to Lloyd George, the British Prime Minister, the conclusion was inescapable. Germany and her allies were defeated in the field. For the German armed forces, reckoning in defeat came with the post-war settlement at Versailles. Motivated by French desires to cripple German military power, the treaty reduced the army to the manpower levels maintained by a minor state. The High Seas Fleet, once the pride and joy of Kaiser Wilhelm II, steamed into ignominious captivity at Scapa Flow. Thereafter, the Germans were permitted only to retain enough surface vessels to provide a coastal defence force. The U-boat fleet, which had so nearly brought Britain to her knees, was scrapped, and the Kriegsmarine forbidden to build any others. Another of the Great War's military innovations, the military aircraft, which by 1918 was a proven asset and already a vital element in military operations, was denied to the Germans. All surviving military types were to be scrapped, and no German Luftwaffe was permitted. Significantly, the treaty also forbade the German army to construct and employ the only genuine military innovation to emergency action in the Great War. At the time of the armistice, the tank had seen little more than 2 years' service, but in that period it had proven itself to be a weapon of potential. Its still primitive technology meant that it could not yet be described as a war winner, but there was little doubt by war's end that their use had had a profound moral impact upon the German army. Although the effect of the tank in the Great War has been greatly inflated, its potential to perhaps recast the future of land warfare, break the murderous deadlock of trench fighting, and restore the holy grail of mobility to operations was not lost to visionaries among the ranks of either the victors or the defeated. The Germans, surprisingly, had been very slow to appreciate the potential of this new weapon. Just 20 to 30 of their A7V design were produced by war's end. Certainly tanks played no significant role in the planning or execution of the rash of offensives launched by the Germans between March through to July 1918, which were designed to force a military decision on the Western Front before American forces could arrive in great numbers. Although the Germans did employ tanks, 15 A7Vs were used at Villers-Bretonneux in late April, they contributed nothing of any worth to the outcome of German operations. More significantly in the longer term was the obvious success of the tactics they'd adopted for the opening of their offensives. Groups of men infiltrating through enemy lines, bypassing enemy strongpoints and driving for the rear so as to effect paralysis. successful impact of these tactics was not lost on the Germans, even against the wider strategic failure of their offensives on the Western Front, and these were later to be transposed onto tank operations in the Wehrmacht. The strategic initiative passed to the Allies by mid-July, and thereafter the German army in the West was subjected to a series of great blows, which forced it to back into Belgium. British and French armour played no small role in the rolling back of the German lines. Nowhere was this more apparent than on the 8th of August 1918. For Field Marshal Hindenburg, it was the black day of the German army. On August the 8th, the British army deployed 534 tanks against the German lines, the largest concentration they assembled in the whole war, and it did not matter that only 145 were serviceable on the 9th. In that time, enough damage had been done to the morale of the German forces for the tank to acquire an honoured place in the German mythology of the Great War. The tank was seen as one of the great Allied war winners, and the lasting impression this created was to have a profound impact on post-war German thinking. Even as the armies returned home, there were many on either side who saw in the Versailles settlement nothing but a truce for 20 years and a future German desire for a war of revenge. By denying the Germans a general staff and restricting the army to 100,000 men, the Entente powers believed that they had shackled the German army. General von Seeckt, head of the Reichswehr, believed, however, that these limitations could be turned to Germany's advantage and the army used to explore new ideas on warfare. He was not convinced of the need for a return to a mass German army, concluding from his Great War experiences that the future of warfare lies in small, high-quality mobile armies supported by aircraft. While manpower quality could be assured by the rigorous selection procedures for the Reichswehr, Germany needed ways of circumventing the Versailles restrictions on aircraft, and specifically tanks, to gain experience in their construction and use. The Reichswehr assumed tanks would have a role to play on any future battlefield. Denied the real thing, great effort was taken to simulate them in exercises, with examples constructed from cardboard with rubber gun barrels. Through a secret agreement in the 1920s, Seeckt helped the Reichswehr obtain experience of both building and operating tanks in Russia. Europe's two pariah states sank their ideological differences and cooperated in the military sphere to their mutual advantage. One example was the VK-31 light tank tested at Kazan in the Soviet Union and built in works set up and run by Krupps and Rheinmetall. The appointment of the pro-Panzer General Lutz in 1931 as Inspector of Transport Troops was a significant boost to supporters of armoured warfare in the Reichswehr. Most vociferous protagonist of the concept had been Guderian. His work laid the basis of the German tank arm. It awaited political will to translate it into reality. The appointment of Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany on January 30th, 1933, brought to power an individual ideologically committed to the notion of German territorial expansion, and by war when necessary. The realization of his vision of a greater Germany demanded a strong military, and circumvention of the Versailles restrictions, albeit secretly to begin with, was assumed from his first day in office. In 1933, the specification was issued to industry for a light tank. The chosen Krupp design entered production as the Panzer I in mid-1934. It was designed as a training vehicle pending production of the Panzers III and IV, with which it was planned to equip the combat formations of the Panzerwaffe. At this time, Hitler visited the army testing ground at Kummersdorf to view a display by motorcycle troops, anti-tank guns, armoured cars, and some of the first Panzer Is. Hitler was impressed and excited by what he saw, and cried out, "That's what I need, that's what I want to have." What he saw in these units was that here was a new instrument of war that would allow him to realize his ambitious foreign policy objectives